Welcome and thank you for joining us for the first episode of SIDEOUT with VNS. We wanted to take the opportunity to further reach out and engage our fellow volley nerds in Nova Scotia and beyond, and we're looking forward to sharing this journey with you. I'm John Elliott, the Development Director for Volleyball Nova Scotia, and my co-host in sweet matching VNS cities is Megan Conroy, the Technical Director for Volleyball Nova Scotia. Today we're excited to be joined by two coaches that will be very familiar to the Nova Scotian volleyball community, Michelle Wood and Dan Ota. The conversation with Michelle and Dan will cover a number of topics, including coaching mentorship, continuous learning, coaching philosophy, as well as their thoughts on planning for seasons, practices, and drills. We're looking forward to this. And before we get started, I'd like to provide a brief bio on Michelle and Dan, and this won't do either of them justice. So originally from Ontario, Michelle has been the head coach of the women's volleyball program at Acadia University for 8 years. As an athlete with Team O, Michelle captured the gold medal at the 2005 Canada Games, then attended and played at the University of Toronto from 2005 to 2010. During her time with the Varsity Blues, she was named a U Sport Academic All-Canadian, a two-time Libero of the Year in the OUA, was an OUA All-Star, and the recipient of the OUA Award of Merit. In 2010, she was named the OUA Championship MVP and was nominated for both the prestigious U Sport Therese Quigley Award and the U Sport Libero of the Year Award. As a coach, she was very active and successful while living and studying in Ontario, and wrapped up her Team Ontario experience as the head coach for the women's volleyball team at the 2013 Canada Games in Sherbrooke, Quebec. Internationally, she's represented Canada as an assistant for the women's indoor team at both the 2015 World University Games in Gwangju, South Korea, and the 2017 World University Games in Taipei, China. Since moving to Nova Scotia, she hasn't slowed down. In addition to her U Sport duties, she's the founder and director of the Axe Volleyball Club, is a learning facilitator, and has volunteered countless more hours as a mentor coach with Team Nova Scotia summer programs. Thank you for joining us, Michelle.
Thanks for having me.
Originally from Calgary, Dan's been the head coach of the men's volleyball program at Dalhousie for 21 years and was an assistant coach with the program before becoming the head coach. Before Dalhousie, Dan had coaching success in Alberta, leading teams to both high school and club provincial championships, as well as a Western Canadian championship with Team Alberta in 1997. A certified performance coach, Dan has been on the bench internationally for Canada, winning a silver medal with the men's indoor team at the 2007 World University Games in Bangkok, Thailand, before attending that same competition in 2009 in Belgrade, Serbia. He also helped the men's youth national team win a silver at the 2016 USA Volleyball High Performance Championships. Within Nova Scotia, Dan's been pretty active as well. He's a former executive director for Volleyball Nova Scotia, head coached the Team Nova Scotia men's indoor volleyball teams at both the 2001 and 2005 Canada Summer Games, is a learning facilitator, and has also provided priceless coach mentorship within the Team Nova Scotia programming for a number of years. Thank you very much for joining us, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
So Megan and I will be alternating leading the conversation with questions on different topics. And I'm going to get things started with a few lob balls to get the juices going. So we'll start with Michelle with this one. But your favorite professional or international volleyball athlete you love watching, past or present, and why?
I would probably say Kelsey Robinson, who is an outside hitter with the U.S. women's national team, and she's just such a dominant attacker, has such diverse shots, but the thing that separates her from everyone else is how aggressive she swings at every single ball. She finds a way to put herself in a position to swing and get a kill. So she's pretty dynamic, really explosive, fun to watch.
She runs a pretty mean pipe, which is awesome.
She does.
Dan, favorite professional, past or present?
I guess that's kind of tough for me just because I think I admire watching a lot of really good players, and I wouldn't ever just say there's one player that I put above everyone else. But I guess if you had to put me on the spot, probably someone like Jiba, who was the best player in the world for, most of the 90s. Brazil was on average, one of the smallest teams at every international competition they went to, but they basically were the team of the 90s, winning every major competition I think that they went to. And Jiba kind of exemplified the kind of team they had at that time. Not a particularly big player, at probably around 6'2", 6'3", but just did everything well. An incredibly well-rounded player, and a very fierce competitor. Just willed his team to win on many big occasions. So yeah, no, I would say that would be a good player to kind of watch if you've never had a chance to see him before.
If I'd asked you in 2005 when I got to coach with you, I felt like your immediate answer was going to be Nalbert, Jiva's predecessor.
Another Brazilian player, yes,
Yeah.
another Brazilian player. He, and very similar, like, was good at everything.
Perfect. So maybe we'll start with Dan on this one. But favorite non-volleyball athlete that you, or a non-volleyball athlete you find really interesting, and why, past or present?
Well, I guess I'm feeling a little older now, because the people I talk about as players that I like watching, like a lot of the modern or the new players that I coach don't know who these people are anymore. But just, I guess, someone that's been in the media recently with the docuseries, Michael Jordan. You know, you talk about kind of what was, you know, kind of preeminent athlete of that generation, and certainly the generation that I grew up in, watching sports and falling in love with all sorts of sports in that period. Just the unbelievable competitive fire he had, and just very uncompromising in terms of how he you know, demanded excellence from everyone that was around him. So I guess, yeah, as sport figures is probably the easiest one to kind of say I admire, and he would be a big part of one of that kind of generation, the old school.
The old school. Michelle, favorite non-volleyball athlete you find really interesting, and why?
I mean, I have to go with the same answer Dan had. Obviously, watching The Last Dance is been something that everyone is probably tuning into. But the thing for me in the most recent episode is that, as competitive as Michael Jordan is, you can see that he struggles with the fight with how people question his character, and they want him to be the most competitive, you know, excellent athlete on the court. And there are things that come with that, and he's criticized for those characteristics. So it's such a hard balance between wanting to be the best in the world, but also leaving a legacy of, you know, the type of person you want to be as well.
Great. We're going to go back to Michelle, but maybe 2 or 3 words that you feel describe you as a coach, and why.
I feel like it would be best to ask Dan or other people around what that is. But I guess if I had to choose, you know, how I would describe myself, work ethic for sure, hardworking. That's something that is a backbone for me. You know, detail oriented, probably. I'm able to kind of step back and see things from 50 feet and really assess all of the small things that are going on. So that's important. And then I would say compassionate. I'm definitely a people person. I see people's experiences for what they are, and I can sympathize or empathize with what people are going through.
Yeah, I thought about you answering Dan's words and Dan answering your words.
Yeah.
I don't know if we were in a safe space there, so
I'm not sure what would have come out.
Dan, what about you? What are a couple of words that you'd use to describe yourself as a coach?
Yeah, I really struggle at these things, just like the favorite athlete, because I don't stop and think about, you know, describing myself that often, although it's probably not a bad exercise. I would say probably the 2 words that probably come to mind most quickly, without having to think too hard about it, is just being really competitive, and then the other is just demanding. You know, kind of like what I talked about with MJ. And I think most people that have spent any time around me in a sport context would say that I embody those 2 words pretty well.
Agreed. And then last lob ball, last icebreaker. Dan, what is your favorite volleyball coach memory?
I'm glad you threw this at me with a little bit of notice, because I actually have a tie, which is like such a kind of a lame thing to do, but I have to say, okay, so the one of my earliest coaching memories is actually one of them, and that's like I was a junior high coach in Calgary, and I wouldn't expect anyone who had played for me at that time to be tuning into this, but we were, in my first year, we were like the worst team in the league as far as our record, and then the next year we were the best team in the league. So kind of like the worst to first kind of situation. I mean, it's junior high volleyball. Like let's like, you know, put it in perspective. It wasn't like we were playing for like the world championships or anything like that. But I think as a coach, you always are going to remember the things where you feel like you've had a fairly large impact. And so I think in my first 2 years of coaching volleyball, like going from worst to first, which I think is something that's relevant right now in my situation. That's definitely was something that I didn't intend to set out doing that, but going through that was really rewarding. And then I think a more recent example, and why it's a tie for me, is the 2014-15 team that I coached here, which is only a few years ago. We were a top 2, top 3 team in the country, if you followed the rankings that year, for pretty much the entire season, and then and finished top 4 at nationals. But that team was littered with Nova Scotia athletes. 5 of the 7 starters were all Nova Scotia developed athletes. So I think, you know, I've had, you know, similar results over the years, but I think that group really exemplified a team that was, you know, grew up in Nova Scotia, you know, had various points of contact with me over that time, among, you know, many other really important coaches in the area. And, you know, I think for me, it was very satisfying to have such a successful season with a group like that.
Great. We're going to find that junior high roster from back in the day and make sure they all watch this.
Oh, that might come up later in like some of the dumbest things I did and what I learned from them. But anyways, I don't want to hog the mic from Michelle here.
Michelle, fondest volleyball coaching memory?
I think all of you guys would have remembered me sharing this one when I was coaching with the 2015 FISHU team, and we were in Gwangju in South Korea. We had a chance to play Zimbabwe, and you know, people's volleyball experiences are all very different in what they're trying to achieve and accomplish as an end range goal. And for Zimbabwe, they had been granted entrance into the FISHU games because they had won their university championship. And so for our program to go out, you know, we had a pretty dominating performance, and, you know, our expectations were to perform the way we needed to on our side. But for Zimbabwe, the celebration and excitement for them just to physically be in that space and to experience international volleyball at that level was something that just, you were very aware of what that experience meant to them. From the moment that they hopped onto that court, there was a parade of athletes coming through the gym celebrating, and they had, you know, musical instruments and African drums, and they danced their way onto the court because this was a celebration of an experience that they were privileged to have. And I remember at the end of the 3-0 win against the team, they were immensely grateful to be able to have played us. And the coaches came up to us and shook our hands, and they asked for a video camera or a USB or some sort of video footage of that match so that they could share it with the families back home, because they didn't even have access to that. And in the corner of the gym, after the match finished and they had lost 0-3, their supporters and fans and other competitors in other sports were up there cheering for them, and they created this little dance circle. And so in that moment, it was more than volleyball for them. And that was something that was really eye-opening, that people get to experience these things. And we as coaches get to experience so many cultures, countries, different gyms across the country through our volleyball experience. And that's something that we have to remember to be grateful for.
Great, thank you. All right, Megan, you take it away.
All right. Well, as everyone can see, most of us are coming in from home. Dan's getting a bit of sun there, but we're sitting here in the middle of a pandemic. You know, we've all been self-isolating in our homes and working as best we can from home for the last few months now. And obviously, this has had an impact. While the volleyball season was over, the competitive part of the season was over just as this began for you guys. But we're wondering kind of how you guys are doing. How has COVID-19 been affecting you personally and professionally? Michelle?
Yeah, I mean, I wear slippers to all of my meetings. And if you know me, I travel like exclusively with my moccasins. It doesn't matter if I'm a guest in your home, I come with a little bag with my moccasins. So the fact that I get to wear my slippers all the time is really great. But I think I think like most people, like when the quarantine started, everyone thought about like creating these lists of things that they probably had to do. And, you know, if most people can describe me, they know that I'm a doer, and I'm a busy person, not in a, hey, let's fill your calendar with things to do, but like meaningful experiences that I feel like I'm always trying to propel myself. And I have this mindset and this mantra that I kind of live by, like, don't stand still. And for me, don't stand still means even if you're taking a small step forward, you're progressing yourself. And it doesn't matter how small it is, it's valuable and it's important. So when it came to the first couple of days of quarantine, I have a list posted right now on my fridge of like, hey, do this exercise, you run this many times, work out this many times. And it was my way of not necessarily feeling valued, but feeling productive and like I was moving something forward because I wasn't sure what that was supposed to look like. And then my assistant coach said to me, you don't have to come out of quarantine having written a book. And that sat heavy with me because there is this culture right now of like, how are we taking quarantine and how are we bettering ourselves and propelling ourselves and coming out even better than who we were before. But for individuals like myself, I think it was like really important for me to stand still and take the time to like actually see what is important, what's valuable, because I often compromise what is important to me for these other valuable experiences. And so standing still is okay for me. It's giving me a clearer picture about what the future looks like and what are the things that I want to focus on. So that's been a very valuable lesson for me in all of this.
Yeah, it's been, I think somebody asked me, when is the last time I wasn't doing something with volleyball? And I'm confident it was before I started playing volleyball when I was like 10 years old. So it's and it's a friend who's not involved in sports. So it was just an interesting perspective. So I hear you on that.
Yeah. The other thing that was pretty funny is that I would ask myself every morning when I wake up, there were 3 questions that I asked myself in the day or my husband. What time is it? And then in the middle of the day, it was, what day is it? And then the third question was, or I can't believe it's already 8 o'clock. Like it was every single day these things came up.
Absolutely. I hear you. Dan, how about you? How have you adapted or surviving through COVID so far?
Well, first of all, anybody watching this feels tired after listening to Michelle. You can rest assured this is how I feel most times I've finished a conversation with Michelle, and we're just getting started. So this is going to feel like a marathon at the end of this. I would say like it's impacted, most people I know in a fairly significant way, whether it's, economic or, just personal stuff, as you asked. I don't think you could overstate like just like the personal impact, certainly as the reality is set in about, what life looks like when you're kind of distancing yourself to such an extent for this long and for, foreseeably quite a bit longer. So I think that that's been, tough in terms of dealing with that. And it's been tough on people around me for sure. And then I think we adapt as humans, or we try to. And so it's given me opportunities to reconnect with people that I don't talk to very often. And I think that was pretty popular. Maybe it still is, whether it's friends or even alumni at a professional level to kind of make sure we're staying engaged with those people. Obviously the time represents a whole lot of things. So, initially like my place got a real thorough cleaning, which usually is I don't give it that much attention. So my place actually like looks like it's capable of hosting people again, which is nice. But that said, like more on a work level, like we're doing things that we normally wouldn't be able to do this time of year. just because we just have that kind of time. And so, I think everybody's looking for a little more structure in their days, and obviously the new normal looks very different. But that said, and talking to our student athletes, over the past several weeks, like most of them got to the point where they were getting bored of playing video games, which is saying something.
Who would have thought?
I would have suspect if you ask most teenage boys, like if you get to spend like weeks and weeks just playing video games, they would say, where do I sign up? But apparently there is a point where that becomes tenuous. So anyways, I think those are some of the things that immediately come to mind.
And Dan, what would you typically be doing during this time, like with your coaching career, and how does that look different right now?
Okay, well, it's May 14th today, in case people are watching this down the road. And so I think the VNS people here would understand very clearly as well. What's typically happening this time of year is it's a heavy recruiting period for university coaches, because we would have just been coming off of provincial championships in April. People like Megan and John would be like trying to kind of get back to normal themselves. And in meanwhile, like coaches like Michelle and myself, we would be at a national championship right now. Michelle will probably have a binder of athletes that she had ongoing conversations and like knew their, the names of their pets and things like that, while normal coaches like myself would be trying to just figure out who these kids were. But yes, it represents a very busy time for people like myself at this time of year. And so I think it's kind of a bit of a weird feeling, because this time of year we're just used to being busy, and I'm used to going about 6 days straight with little or no sleep. Somewhere like this year would have been Edmonton. So yeah, I don't know. It's an odd feeling, and but yeah, and then usually you get a little bit of a break, and then you're thinking about the summer already for camps or provincial teams or that sort of thing.
Yeah. Michelle, what about you? Things you'd normally be doing this time of year, or what that looks like in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, just to go off of what Dan was saying, recruiting is the prime focus at this time. And so that's just changed. It's still a huge part of what we're doing. It's just in a different capacity. So, online, we're plugged in a little bit more. We're having Zoom chats with these potential recruits. And I think it's a scary time for all of those prospective student athletes for even 2021, because they didn't get that contact that they were hoping for over the provincial championships or national championships. So I've just found another way to make it accessible. And I actually think through doing online conversations and Zoom chats, I'm finding it a more personal experience, as opposed to, these where you're just seeing them in a volleyball light. And it's forced me I'm doing questionnaires with some of my recruits. Hey, you ask me a question, I'll ask you a question. We kind of go back and forth, so you get to know them a little bit more as a person. Sending articles to see, what are your thoughts on this? Let's chat about this, and kind of pick their brain. So that's been different, but interesting. And I think it's something that I'll probably move forward with. And then the other side of it is usually I'm heavily, heavily involved with camp development right now, and whether that's sport camps or multi-sport camps. So that's a little bit on a standstill, and we're just trying to navigate around that and figure out, okay, how can we provide programming maybe throughout the school year instead?
Yeah, definitely. Very quickly, either Dan or Michelle, any kind of like 1 or 2 tips for athletes that are, finishing grade 10, finishing grade 11 this year, that haven't been recruited, that are looking to reach out? I know this could be, I'm sure, multiple episodes in itself in terms of talking recruiting, but just kind of in the reality of where we are in 2020 right now, 1 or 2 pieces of advice for athletes who are hoping to play post-secondary. Dan?
Well, I think based on the reaction to my last talk to VNS athletes about recruiting, I don't want it to scare anyone. So maybe I'll just hand this off to Michelle first.
Okay.
I think
I remember that talk.
I think they all remember that talk. I think the biggest thing right now is patience. that everyone feels like they need to be in a mass rush or panic to solidify what their future looks like. And it is so important to make sure that you're doing your due diligence and making sure it's the school that you want, it's the program that you want, and then it's the volleyball program that you want, instead of just trying to quickly sign somewhere because you think that, you know, you may not have an opportunity. So patience with that. The next thing I would say is that because we can't access, watching you live, to make sure that you're actually sending video footage, and leave the video footage live. You don't need to, edit all of your footage and create a highlight reel. We want to see it in its real contents. So send the video footage, send coaches contact information so that we can kind of do our back check on that. Any physical testing numbers that you have, make sure that that's included in your email, and just ask to have a conversation with the coach. Share what program you're interested in, and begin the relationship that way. It's not something that's going to happen overnight because we're not in a position to make these decisions right now. And this is new for coaches. And I'm not naive throughout this whole situation. I'm very candid with the student athletes and say, I have not been in this situation before. I'm learning how to navigate this as well.
Yeah, that's great advice. Dan, anything to add, or even a ditto will work?
I thought that was a great answer.
Great.
Safest thing
Ditto,
I could
I like
say, given
I
my
like it.
history.
Thanks, guys.
I think, the folks watching at home need to know that these two really do love each other. And
We do. We really do.
There's no daggers.
Yes, I tease Michelle. I tease Michelle relentlessly, and she puts up with it.
Listen, I will not be bullied.
Never bullied. Tease.
It goes the other way.
All right. Maybe just kind of going back in time here, but just interested in each of your introduction. Like, what did your introduction to coaching volleyball look like? Let's start with Dan.
Probably not quite the illustrious playing career that Michelle had, based on what you said of her bio. That's actually, I didn't know all those things, Michelle. It's pretty impressive. I was an average volleyball player. I was a better player in other sports. And I think volleyball was just one of the first sports that was happening in the calendar year. And I started coaching as soon as I got out of high school, basically. So my first year at university, I was head coaching, as I said earlier, at my former school at the junior high level, and didn't have a particularly successful first season, as I said, for worst team in the league. But just seeing how happy the team was when we finally won our first game of the year, I think that's pretty much the last game of the year, kind of got me to come back and to do it. And then I got pretty serious about it once we had some success. And I never would have been able to predict that because, again, it wasn't my best sport. I enjoyed playing volleyball. I liked watching volleyball. Calgary was a hotbed of men's volleyball at that time, and it still is. But I mean, we had the national team full-time center there at the time, and so I got to watch a lot of great volleyball when I was younger. But yeah, no, that's kind of how I got serious, and then I just was lucky and was kind of in the right place, right time, and on a number of occasions in my early years to have opportunities to work with some really good people and have some success, and that tends to snowball. And so that was kind of the start of it for me.
Michelle?
Yeah, I think the commonality in my experience, in my intro to volleyball and intro to coaching, was that I had a surplus of people behind me. And I think that was a huge part in where I am today, because these people believed in me and showed confidence in me. And I'm not sure if I didn't have those people, whether or not I'd be where I am, because when you hesitate or doubt, it's nice to have those people in your corner. And I did. I had great people. I started coaching while I was playing, which was great. I would like to say that I was always a leader or a kind of coach while I was playing, but I started coaching high school when I was doing my teaching practicum. And it was amazing, the things that you're trying to tell your athletes on the court. And then you hop into your practice right after. You're like, oh, this is what my coach is this whole time. Like, it's this aha moment. And I went from 0 to 100. I went from coaching high school that year to assistant coaching with our provincial team, because someone believed in me and someone was willing to take the time to invest in me. And that just transpired into, you know, every single year someone was in my corner and leading me to where I am.
Great. And kind of going from like maybe your intro to coaching to speaking about like when you each felt like you really got hooked on like volleyball as like maybe a career or something you were going to do with a lot more of your time. Like, was there a specific event or person that really made that happen for each of you? Michelle?
I had influential people for sure. I mean, my middle school coach and my university coach definitely were big, you know, influencers in my life. But I think the moment or the idea of problem solving and this puzzle within volleyball, and that intrigued me. As a player, you're supposed to play free and not be super analytical while you're playing. But as a coach, we get to analyze and look at things from, you know, so far back and see how all of the cogs work together, and how if you just manipulate one little cog or invest or do something, how much that trickles into everything else that you're doing. And I love that idea of problem solving. And I mean, you could look at my end of season this year, and that's a prime example that when my setter went down and my other setter had a concussion, and now we're heading into championships and I've got to figure out what that looks like. That's what, not, I don't love, knock on wood, I do not love that, but that's when right away my brain starts, you know, kicking and saying like, how can I solve this? How can I maximize all of the people that I have? And if you saw it, I mean, I had a 3-setter non-setter rotation going. I had 14U volleyball going with a setter out of position 3 and rotate around. And you find every creative way to maximize the people and the potential around that. And that's the part about coaching that I love.
Great. Dan, what got you hooked?
Well, I mean, I think I enjoyed coaching at like a school and club level when I was younger, but I don't think at that point I took coaching as a career path very seriously. It was actually when I came to Dalhousie, and I was in my first year of law here at Dal, and I had the opportunity that year, fortunately, to work with the Dal team under Rick Al Scott's leadership. They're no relation.
Oh.
Anyone that's in club volleyball would know Al, and Al was the head coach here for 20 years before me. But as I was saying, it was that first year, and really that was my first opportunity to work with the university program to that extent. And you know, I had success at the high school and club levels before I came here. And I think, so I was always going to be interested in coaching, but I think being exposed to volleyball at this level, that early in my life, and then probably a combination of maybe coming to some sort of reconciliation that I didn't really want to pursue law as a career, although I had an affinity towards it earlier in my life. Yeah, it was just like the combination, just being at a certain place at a certain time in your life, and even then, like, I loved working with the varsity program, and we had a lot of success. We hosted a national championship my first year. We won a bronze medal in our first year. We won a bronze medal in our second year, and then I think it became, I think that's kind of when it dawned on me that this is something that I actually wanted to do. I felt I was actually pretty good at it, and then there could be a career opportunity there. But fully understanding, and Michelle would be able to attest to this, there's very few, you know, openings for full-time coaches across Canada in our sport. So you can't really go into anything like this with any sort of expectation that you're going to have a job waiting for you at the end of that. So I went on a bit of a, you know, a limb there and did my master's degree in coaching at the University of Calgary. And that, you know, again, it led to eventually my opportunity here at Dal. But yeah, no, I guess I just had enough positive reinforcement in terms of just the success that whatever team I was working with at the time was having, and just, I guess, when the reality set in, like, here's an actual job opportunity, if you're willing to go after it, and it just worked out. I would say that the vast majority of people in my position would never have even had that opportunity. So I would say, like, I was as fortunate as I was, fitted for this career path.
Great. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I think both of you guys probably alluded. We're going to talk a little bit about mentorship and people who've had some influence on you guys over the years. And like I said, you both kind of alluded to some folks that were in your corner or that believed in you in the past. And so, Michelle, I'll start with you. Who has been or currently is a mentor for you?
Yeah, I do
Why?
think, I think mentorship is important. It helps guide you, helps, not validate decisions, but it's really great to have somebody to bounce ideas off of and to see like-minded individuals in very similar situations. So, obviously my former head coach at the University of Toronto, Christine Drakeage, has been a significant person in my life as far as trust that I can go to and ask questions. But I'd also say my assistant coaches. I think that often it's looked at as the head coach is the person mentoring or guiding, but I get just as much back from my assistant coaches and use them to help bounce those ideas off of and get guidance, because they all have had valuable experiences as student athletes themselves, but also as coaches. So just making sure that I respect them and see them as a mentor as well.
Absolutely. Dan, how about you?
I think it's probably the most obvious thing to talk about coaches that you work for. And so like Al Scott, who kind of gave me this opportunity to work with the DAO program. And, even though we don't speak as often as we used to, he still, makes time to come to practice of mine and doesn't probably offer advice more than just says, I really like what you're doing here and there. And, I think even as infrequent as those conversations have become over the years, I think he's a guy that his record kind of speaks for itself. And so that I learned a lot of things from him. I think in terms of just acting as a professional coach and being good at what I do away from the court. My current boss and athletic director, Tim Maloney, has been somebody that I think has been great for, just changing the culture of our department and therefore our program as well in a real positive way. And he is a guy that kind of was at school at Dow at the same time as I was. And so we've known each other for a number of years, which can be both a good thing or bad thing depending on the situation, as you can imagine. But I'd say those are two probably still fairly current mentors, and in different capacities for sure.
Yeah,
Megan,
sorry, go ahead.
I'll chime in there as well. There are a number of people, and I would like to say volleyball does a really great job across the country to be able to pick up the phone and just, give a call to any coach across any conference. But Dan, I'll throw you a little bone here that I love my conversations with Dan, and, he does have a brilliant mind. So I have no problem calling Dan and say, tell me what you think about. And it might be, 10 hours later that we get off the phone because Dan talks too much. But, I think it's really cool that, within our own conference that we can use one another.
Yeah, it's, when I'm sure anybody who's involved in sport has folks that have been in those mentorship roles. And it's interesting how as you get older, many of mine were former coaches and people that I really, really valued as an athlete. And as I've gotten older, as I've gotten more into coaching and have now certainly been coaching probably longer than I've been playing, those relationships with those people almost balance out a little bit more. It's a little more of they're starting to learn things from me. I mean, they were always open to it, but just, my involvement with the sport has is current and theirs is maybe retiring. So it's interesting how that balance kind of shifts as your career moves on in coaching. What would be kind of one or two key kind of lessons or pieces of advice or something that's memorable from a mentor that has kind of guided you moving forward as a coach? Dan, anything that comes to mind?
Well, just in terms of the people I mentioned, I mean, first with Al, like he was an incredible and still is an incredibly organized individual, and his degree of planning was like beyond anything I'd ever experienced before, and probably will experience, you know, from now on. But I certainly took that as a very important quality in running a program, and I think Michelle could attest to this. Like there's a lot of aspects of running a volleyball program that got nothing to do with running practices and sitting on the bench during games, that most people probably would never really be able to appreciate until they were in that situation for an extended period. So I certainly took that away from Al, and I think for Tim, just in terms of developing the kind of culture we want, and developing the skills, and I guess having the willingness to grow in those areas. Like I was never a great communicator, and still am challenged in that particular part of my coaching repertoire. But I feel like I'm a far better communicator than I was, you know, even a few years ago. So to me, that's, and there's, you know, you could have an entire session on just communication, of course, but those would probably be two of the biggest ones.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. One or two kind of key things you've taken from those folks who've had a big impact on you?
Yeah, I agree with the first one that Dan said, the organization and attention to detail. Those are almost the foundational elements that kind of bring out confidence in myself as a coach, but I also recognize it in other coaches. The more you're prepared, the more confident you are in what you're doing. But the second lesson was, my mentor told me to surround myself with people that I trust, more importantly than people that understand the volleyball side of the game, because those are the things that you can work through and you can learn through. But to have people have your back and support you and motivate you and push you and challenge you is also important, but that you have people you can trust.
Yeah, I did a mentorship PD session last night, and that was one of the first things that I brought up in a successful kind of mentorship atmosphere, is there has to be complete trust between those that are involved in that relationship. Otherwise it's tough for it to develop and move forward, for sure. And both of you have very graciously spent a lot of time with our Team NS programs before I've been involved, and certainly since, with being mentors for our coaches, for our athletes. And of course, we appreciate your involvement very much. And looking at now yourselves that have kind of shifted into those mentorship roles, what do you feel, and Michelle, you kind of touched on it, probably Dan as well, what do you feel are, you know, a couple of really valuable qualities in a mentor? What, you know, for some coaches that are out there that are thinking like, you know, I'm bringing in younger coaches in my club, trying to keep them involved, what are some things that's really important for those mentors to possess in terms of qualities?
Yeah, I'll go ahead because I'm going to tag on what you said. I have trust written down as my number one. And I think that the thing we have to remember is learning is vulnerable. It is incredibly vulnerable to put yourself in that position and try and figure out and navigate what's right or wrong, what's, you know, with judgment or lack of judgment. So to have that open space where you're free to explore and not be judged whether something is right or wrong. And then the next thing is maybe not a quality, but opportunity for openness and to have experiences. It's important that if you are mentoring someone, that you provide them with as many opportunities to experience all facets of the game, whether that's in-game coaching, whether that's practice planning, whether that's, you know, stuff to do with, you know, mental skills preparation, load management, how a drill functions. They need to be a part of that. And if you only choose to involve them in certain aspects of the game, they don't learn the whole thing, and then they're not prepared. And that leads me to my next thought, is that time is important. You have to invest time in this individual, because back to what I said, the more prepared they can feel, the more confident they're going to feel, the more they're going to be ready to hop into an environment and feel, you know, I've got this, and know that someone's in their corner as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. Dan?
Well, even though I've been doing this for a few years with you guys, I still feel like it's something I'm trying to get better at. I would echo a lot of what Michelle said in terms of like developing relationships and being very open, and I think having the ability to have empathy for what that coach is experiencing, and I guess being very judicious in the amount of kind of instruction or advice to give, even if that's what's being sought after in some cases. I think that if anything, just kind of seeing myself as someone that just kind of facilitates that process versus like just gives a kind of a like a cooking book on how to do this and that, and here's what you need, and that sort of thing. I think it's easier to do it that way, quite a bit easier to do it that way for both the mentor and the mentee, but ultimately probably doesn't have the same kind of outcomes that you want compared to something that's a little harder, a little more drawn out. You got to ask more questions and have longer conversations, and go through some, some different experiences, like Michelle said, and really taking what you can out of that, and not really having necessarily like a clearly drawn out blueprint of how it's going to go. So, I don't think I've had that kind of relationship yet with too many coaches to kind of go through like kind of the seminal process of coaching at the university level, at least, and then kind of going to the point where they're doing that on a full-time basis with any sort of consistency, and then kind of continuing on the relationship there. So this is, far from kind of like kind of an experienced perspective on this, but I definitely would echo a lot of what Michelle said.
Dan, your point about facilitating is so important, because we have to remember that this is their journey. And like you said about the cookbook, we're not trying to replicate exactly who we are. And I think sometimes that's the mindset, is like what's right or wrong and your way is right. And I should be exactly like you. It's their journey, and making sure that you take the time to ask, what do you want out of this experience? What are your goals and objectives? And really tailoring it to their journey.
Yeah. Great point. Love it. And kind of to wrap up our little section on mentorship, what are the benefits to being a mentor? I know both of you guys have incredibly busy years. And as you said, even in the summer, I know both of you are involved in camps and preparing for your seasons and all those things. So what makes you want to work with teams and coaches in the summers when you're already quite busy? And just in general, why be a mentor? Why should a coach out there think about taking that on? Dan?
Well, I think that's a great question that every coach should ask themselves, why they're doing what they're doing, because there's certainly a price and sacrifice you pay. For me, it's a little easier without having, kind of a family of my own to deal with or worry about. But that said, I mean, my time is pretty busy throughout the year. But I look at other people around the country, and they, someone like Glenn Hogue, like he never says no. As busy as he is, I've never known the man to say no to something, and it just kind of speaks to like his commitment to the sport and his willingness to give and give and give to the point where it's almost ridiculous how much time he's giving. And so I feel like, the least I can do is kind of follow a similar kind of approach, as far as like, if someone's asking me for my time, they think that's valuable, and it's a way for me to give back to the sport, that's been very good to me, then I think that's the least I can do in that respect. So it's not a super hard thing to justify.
Awesome. Michelle?
Yeah, I do feel a responsibility, and not in an obligatory way of I have to do this, but a privileged way of I get to do this. And it definitely inspires me to be around, such hardworking athletes and other coaches who are trying to experience the same thing I experienced however many years ago. So I find it very meaningful. I learn a ton from, even if it's one thing, even if there's one message or one way of delivery, or, there's always something that I personally gain from it. But I think that, I have knowledge, I have information I can share, and I think it's my responsibility to be there to share it. And the other thing too is that I do believe mentors or experiences can expire, or you can become very stagnant in what you're learning or doing. So the more that you can put yourself in different situations around different people, it really challenges you to think, why am I doing something the way that I'm doing? And maybe, you know, thinking about how you can reframe it or go about it a different way to reach a different audience.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
And, you know, I just want to dive into a little bit about continuous learning and growth. And I mean, you guys have kind of started that conversation talking about mentorship, but, you know, in general, how have each of you expanded your coaching abilities over time in addition to that mentorship relationship? Let's start with Dan.
Yeah, I follow a pretty simple rule. If I don't know something, I go to someone who knows more than me, and then generally speaking, that's how I go about that. But I think the more you do it, the more you come to understand, like, there's so much out there that you really haven't mastered yet. And so that there's that process of kind of just getting to know more about whether it's the game or people. It is an ongoing thing, and the more you do it, the more you want to do it more, because the more you realize there's so much more you don't know. So it is a very eye-opening thing to start doing once you've started to do it, I guess. I think if I were to give some advice to somebody too, like in this kind of in a club context or whatever, whoever's kind of be watching this sort of thing, is I found it's useful to spend some time working with athletes or teams that are at a level higher and also a level below you in a development pathway. So in my context as a university coach, that would be, you know, at a club or provincial team level as one step below, and then at a national team level, obviously as one step above. Because I think kind of knowing where you fit in the larger picture of athlete development is I think it probably is a good way to kind of start to prioritize kind of what you're doing in the time that you've got with these athletes, you know. And so I found that pretty valuable, and I think people that have had a chance to kind of have some contact with our program that we're working at a club level, like, I think it gave them a greater appreciation for you know, what it takes to kind of play at this next level, not just being good at the level that they're at, but like, what does that jump represent, and what do they need? What kind of gap do they need to be able to overcome with the athletes that they have? And then being able to kind of articulate the same kind of things to athletes that are working at the level, you know, below them in the development pathway, or earlier in the development pathway, for a better term.
Great, thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, I try and put myself in not necessarily uncomfortable situations as often as I can, but situations where I'm going to have to force myself to learn or reach a higher level. And working with the national team for those 2 summers definitely put me in that position. And I learned so much and acquired so much information by just witnessing international volleyball and the different ways that teams play in different systems. And what it really emphasized for me is that there's no right way of doing something, and you have to look at your personnel and figure out what is the best way for the group that you have. And so that's something that I'm constantly looking at and evaluating. What group of athletes do I have coming in, and how can I better our system or adjust our system, and what are other people doing? And it doesn't mean I'm always going to agree with what they're doing, but I'm going to try and figure out what's going to work for me. So watching a lot of video, trying to get these professional development experiences, any session that's going on right now, you know, I'm trying to tune in and figure out, you know, how this is going to benefit my program. Or I often put the club director hat on and figure out how can this benefit our local athletes. And then the other thing that I think I could do a better job at is probably, you know, I'm in an institution that has other sports competing, and I probably could do a better job of witnessing what happens in the basketball gym, what happens on the football field, and really looking at a cross-section of the different sports and what are some better strategies. So that's probably something I could be better at.
Great. And this might change. I don't know if you have more time now that you're at home a little bit. It's just your time has changed. But, you know, what are you currently spending time learning about, or looking to learn more about? Topics, systems, leadership skills? Just love to hear, you know, what you're looking to pick up in this time where maybe you're not at a national championship. Michelle?
Yeah, Dan will laugh because we started this conversation early this year, but just stress recovery response and load management stuff. And, you know, we had the wonderful capacity to have verts this year. And so now with 1 year under our belt, and I know Dan has had them for a little bit of time now, what does it mean? How can we become better volleyball players? How can we be safer, maximize, be more explosive? So really diving into that at this time. So that's probably like my one passion project. And then from another standpoint, really looking at culture. And that's been a huge thing for me. So, you know, books that I'm reading right now, Atomic Habits is a huge one, and looking at, you know, how do we assess goals versus how do we create small little systems in place that are these, you know, habits that can be reproducible every single day because we do them naturally instead of these overall arching large goals. So really looking at team culture around those things and around discipline. So just really small things is huge for me right now.
Great. Dan?
Well, I can't say I'm reading books as much as Michelle is. Like, for me, that's more of a Michelle Jason thing. Jason has a list that's getting longer of books that I should be reading or should have already read.
We'll send you the Coles notes.
Well, I think it implies like people need books to like engage their brains, whereas I need to use books as more like a way to relax. So, but yeah, no, I think for me, it's just a lot of it is just talking to people about things that they're dealing with, and whether it's this current, you know, pandemic situation, and just kind of learning how to manage kind of chaotic environments like we're in right now. And I don't necessary thing. I mean, sometimes I'll read stuff online about dealing with these types of things, but also I think just, you know, long-term planning, which is always something like we like to have more time to do. So all the things that, you know, coaches like Michelle get to do every day because they're uber organized. Mere mortals like me can just now use the time that I've got to be a little better at this. So I'm trying not to put unrealistic expectations on what's going to happen and where I'm going to be at the other end of this thing. But I think just making sure I set some, you know, fairly obvious but also achievable goals every day, every week. And I think, you know, I'm getting better at dealing with that. It's kind of the same advice I would try to give any athlete in this time as well.
Great. And just kind of to finish off with, you know, growth and continuous learning, I'm really interested to hear from each of you for the on-court product, whether it's training or competition. What have been some light bulb moments or aha moments you've had in the last few years as you've learned a little bit more about the game as it's played or practiced? And let's start with Michelle.
Yeah, I think it probably goes back to what I said before about how to use your personnel more effectively and not just continuously running the same system. So I've thought about that a lot, about who I have and how I can use them, and what do the numbers show? Why am I doing what I'm like? What is this person doing, hanging out when the ball never gets delivered to that side of the court? So just really looking at the video side of that, the statistical side of that, and the people that I have to try and figure out why I'm doing what I'm doing and how I can utilize the people better.
Right. Yeah.
As far as like aha moments, like I don't think there's a lot of them, but I guess maybe a theme that's kind of emerged for me over the years is just players seem to not pay attention when you want them to, and players pay attention to things that you wish they hadn't paid attention to. And there's probably a few examples out there for me. I remember when I was a younger coach coaching a club, and I had a habit of throwing my clipboard. And in one match where the referee was making some calls that our players didn't like, I just left my clipboard on the bench, and then one of the guys on the bench grabbed it and threw it on the floor. And then I got the card. So I was like, he wouldn't have done that if he hadn't watched me throw my clipboard. So like, I wish he hadn't been paying attention to some of those things. And then, you know, having having some conversations with former athletes, and I'm having more of these kind of, funny kind of reminiscing stories with alumni, because, I've been coaching for a few years now. And the stuff that they bring up, and I'm like, oh my God, like, this is what you remember. This is what you remember. You're going to throw that in my face? Like, it's not any of the other things that I thought were important. So I think it's, if anything else, like the aha moment for me is just like, you got to be really, really paying attention to what you're doing and saying, because it seems like they always catch you doing the things that you wish they didn't catch you doing. So I'm not sure if that's a real positive lesson for any coaches watching, but just a word of warning that they do pay attention, and sometimes they pay attention to things that you wish they hadn't. So I'm not going to share any specific stories, but I know any alumni that would be watching this would probably have at least 5 or 6 stories that immediately come to mind of things that I did or said that I probably shouldn't have.
Sounds like we just came up with a topic for another episode. It's
episode 2 is
different episode. Yeah, different rules.
I have some great stories of things that athletes remember that are just like, and nothing terrible, but you're just like, you can't believe that they remember that because you don't.
Yeah, it's true. There's a lot of things about coaching that are about the small things, and sometimes you like, a lot of people say you don't remember some of the wins and losses, but you remember these little anecdotal things that are good memories.
Great. Thank you again for joining us for episode 1 of Side Out with VNS, where we had the opportunity to hear from Michelle Wood and Dan Ota on mentorship and continuous learning. Our 1-hour conversation with Dan and Michelle quickly turned into 2 hours of great information, because it's dangerous getting a group of coaches together. Check out episode 2 of Side Out with VNS to hear what Michelle and Dan share about coaching philosophy, seasonal planning, practice planning, and drill planning.